Psychedelics.
Oh my God.
I actually feel like you've now created a story about this. You kept saying don't do it, and I was like, I don't think I agree with him. You think a lot about sex.
This stress and energy seems to come out of nowhere, and then you have sex. Oh my God, that's what the problem was. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are here and we are back with the well-renowned, very, very popular format of the 6 Rounds podcast. And what we're going to do today is with a very special guest of mine. We have Akash Vaghela, who's the founder of RNT, a very, very long-standing friend of mine. We're going to go 6 rounds back to back on this podcast episode. So what we've got is Akash has 3 topics. He has 3 rounds that he's going to hit me with. And I've got 3 topics that he doesn't know about that I'm going to hit him with. And we're going to go back to back, 10 minutes around. Neither of us know what each other's topics are. And we'll see where the next 60 minutes takes us. So, round 1, Akash.
Psychedelics.
Oh, my God. We're going there, are we?
It's got to be done.
So, psychedelics. What are psychedelics?
It's a good question. I guess it's a way to access higher streams of consciousness and see what's possible out there.
And they've become, like, you think about over time, they've become a lot more popular in recent years.
Yeah.
Public figures are talking about them.
That's why we're talking about them.
Exactly. So,
well, obviously it's a taboo subject, but at some point it can't have been a taboo subject because I think most of them, except for probably the more chemically synthesized ones like LSD, are natural, right? Like magic mushrooms, for example. But I think there's a lot of benefits to them, and I think the research is showing that there's lots of benefits to them. So I'd be curious to know, have you tried it?
Well, there's a whole cultural movement on psychedelics, isn't there? Or rather, there's a whole cultural argument, and now a sort of movement to try and overthrow regulation, legislation. And there was a theory, I don't know which documentary it was on, whether you watched it, and they said that the reason they banned psychedelics in the 60s, 70s, whenever it was because people were starting to get this new wave of creative thinking, visionary energy, and they wanted to actually close it down and stop it.
I mean, if you think about what it helps you do, is it helps you squash the ego, right? It destroys your sense of self. So you access the extra layer of consciousness and creativity you wouldn't normally have. So you can imagine if you act on that creativity afterwards, what you can create and what you can come up with. Steve Jobs famously said that if it wasn't for his LSD trips back in the 60s or 70s or whenever it was, he doesn't think the iPhone or the Apple products and how beautiful they are would have come about. I don't know if it was the iPhone or whichever product it was, but he said it was a big part of his success because it made him see art and beauty and creativity in a different way.
Yeah, and Elon Musk, like, obviously he's like one of the best innovators, creative guys of our sort of era. And he talks about the fact that psychedelics should be, I mean, he doesn't publicly and openly discuss the use of them, or at least personally, but he does advocate the use of them for various things, whether that's advancing creativity, which can be anything from your basic entry-level stuff like, well, on the absolute basic, like drinking water, being clean, removing brain fog, up to flotation tanks, and then into the realms of psychedelics, things like that. And in medical field now, they're, the NHS, you can sign up to the NHS to take part in a trial, and they'll use it on you to test for or to work on certain things, specifically around neuro pathways, where your brain is malleable and it gets carved in a way it shouldn't. Or people who have PTSD and their nervous system actually rewires itself. They're using it there now for scientific studies and medicine to help people.
Well, there's a lot of successful research, especially in America, around anxiety, depression, PTSD, and they're seeing a lot of success from different types of psychedelics and its use when it's done in a controlled way. And I think a lot of the taboo comes from like the odd. When it's not done in a controlled state, or it's not done in a, when you and your mates are pissing about with.
Yeah, Glastonbury.
Yeah. then it's a different story. But I think if you use it in a controlled way and in an intentional way, then you can gain a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with that. And like to date, what's your like exposure, experience been with that field or that study or that sort of experience of that?
Yeah, so I've done mushrooms, LSD, and I've done mushrooms and LSD, and then I've done the sort of magic mushrooms you do in Amsterdam, which are you get a little bit of a trip. You see the clouds going weird, and then obviously like the hero ceremony, which is probably likened to ayahuasca, but not really the same. Where you're taking like 9-10 grams and you're basically sent to outer space. Yeah, you're sent to outer space and you're back 6 to 8 hours later, back on Earth. And my experience with it has been, they've all been different strengths. So like the micro stuff where you're either microdosing or you're taking a pack of magic mushrooms and seeing the clouds move. That sort of stuff is very like, you're just feeling very elevated. Your consciousness just becomes a bit more elevated. You feel more creative, feel more in tune with nature, etc. And then obviously the deeper you go, the more you just collapse that sense of self, and I think you just enter these realms of universes, which makes you question or makes you think about, what the mind is capable of. Because if this can be done through psychedelics, it can probably be done through the mind in its own way. So it just goes to show how far there is to stretch the mind if we wanted to.
What do you think is happening there? Because like, it doesn't matter who you listen to talk about psychedelics. The one consistent message is that it's one of the things you can't explain. You can only really ever experience it. You can't explain it because and especially when you go to the ultimate extreme, like a DMT experience, like really up into the clouds, you can't explain with words what the feeling, experience, sense is. What do you think is actually, when there is that disconnect between the ability to articulate what it is and what it is because it's such a different experience? Why do you think, what do you think's actually happening when you take psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD?
Well, in my experience, I don't know the research on all of this, so I'll speak from just anecdotal experience, is I think it's you're detaching from the body and you're entering like this weird energetic state. And the reason why in every, when I've done the hero doses, the biggest struggle I have is I try and keep control. So I'm there trying to like stay in the body, but my mind and my experience is going into another realm, and I'm moving through these like times and spaces, and there is no physical experience. It's all happening. Again, I'm trying to describe it and you can't describe it, right? That's why when you hear of psychedelics, you always see these weird sort of shapes and colors, right? And that's pretty much what it is. And my struggle when I'm doing it is always I'm trying to control the experience and I'm trying to stay in the body and trying to control the body. And I guess that is one of the sort of benefits of doing it, because you realize that.
Well, it's like when you go into any field of spirituality, connection, soul, or even like we were talking earlier about clairvoyance. I've had so many readings over the last 20 years and all of them are consistently good. Whereas other people that I have them with who are maybe a bit more skeptical get a lot less value. There might be a couple of things that sound good, but they go in there with things to trick the reader, or like they go in there with a skeptical mindset. And I think with anything along the whole spectrum is, like you're saying about there, is when you completely go into it open, committed, and you can let go, that is how you get the best. Mike Tyson talks about when he does the toad, which is like ultimate level of DMT. He says like the first time he did it, he took it and then he was trying to hold on and he was like, no. And then the guy's like, you've got to go for the ride, dude. And as soon as he let go, he just went into this place of like, I mean, it's crazy to think what is actually, if they can't explain it, what is actually happening up there.
Well, I've heard in spiritual circles, they talk about psychedelics as like a hack to cut through the noise. So if you go down the spiritual path and actually find walk the mountain and get to the top of the mountain in an intentional way, I wonder if that's, the bliss that people experience and describe.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see if you were, because we were talking this morning about how entrepreneurship is not perhaps facilitated or encouraged in this country unless when it's really needed. And it's the same with that, with vision and creative. Like the guy who created Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program, that was created while he was on an acid trip. You know, it takes you to this place where it's like you just think on a complete different level. And it's what you're now seeing is a very, very slow progress towards, you know, it's quite commonplace now. Like last night we had a can of CBD drink, you know, which is basically marijuana. It comes from hemp or cannabis, wherever it comes from. But it's the THC is removed, the CBD is utilised for, some people use it for arthritis, anxiety. I use it for chilling out and for sleep. And you're now starting to see this, and like now psilocybin or magic mushrooms being used in clinical trials. If they did sort of open it up a bit, again, it's like you don't want people walking around the street getting run over because they've, you know, taken a dose. But if you could go into a clinic and have a significant dose of psilocybin, you know, 5 to 10 grams of psilocybin, and go under, the results of that, whether it's personally solving a trauma or professionally, even like the flotation tank. I can spend 2 hours in a flotation tank and it'll take me somewhere that I can't access when WhatsApp's going off, social media's going off, things like that.
And I think that's probably a lot of the value in the whole experience.
People who are considering psychedelics, psilocybin, something like that, like closing sentiments, what would your either feedback, not necessarily advice be, but feedback, thoughts, sentiment be towards their approach with that?
I think do it in a controlled environment. Have someone you know who's gone through the experience and have it facilitated. You know, don't just take it with your mates.
Yeah,
in the park, because I don't think you're going to get much out of that.
Agreed. Nicely done. Good round. Round 2. I'll talk about drive. So drive, being driven, and specifically the 2 elements of it, which are sometimes confused. So motivation and discipline. I think you're one of the most driven people, and I often say to you about this window of opportunity. You've got this drive that I find very impressive, admirable, and I remember when I used to have that. You've got this drive, but also with discipline and motivation. Over the last few years, there's been a few times when I've said to you, do you not have to motivate yourself? You know, do you never have to sit there and have to feel like you've got to get the work done? And you've just always, in the main, said, no, I just get it done. And then also discipline, you know, by your very nature, by your very profession, you're consistently disciplined, what you eat, when you sleep, etc., etc. So I just want to talk about it and get a bit of insight into how your life and brain works with regards to what does drive mean to you? You know, how does that feel? And then specifically around motivation and discipline.
Yeah, I know we've discussed this quite a lot, and something when you say to me, you have this window of opportunity and you admire the drive that I have. I often wonder, well, what happens when you don't have it? Like, is it something I'm living through right now and it's just going to disappear? But I can't even imagine that being the case. I just feel like the very nature of the way I live and the way I think, I can't imagine it being slower.
Where does it come from? Where does your drive come from?
I think it's probably an element of just, I want to prove to myself that I can do something. And I think the hardest thing I find is figuring out what that thing is. And I've always found it easy to find in physical realms. So for example, like, I never would have thought 6 months ago I would step in the ring and do a Muay Thai fight. I mean, never done anything like it. I've never done a kick before, anything like it. But once I set my mind to it, then it was just the outcome. You know, you always say to me, the outcome's inevitable. So I think it's just, once I figure out what I want, and that's often the hard bit for me, and then it just lands, and then it feels very natural, and it feels just instinctual, and my gut just says, yeah, just go for it.
And how do you get that? Like, a lot of people, when we talk about success and failure, very predictable. A lot of people have these things they want to achieve, but they never lock in. When we say once, if the decision's made, the outcome is inevitable. When you're looking at like doing a Muay Thai fight, what is it that you go through that mental process, and what is it that locks you in and says, right now I'm on?
I think I just can't accept failure as an option. I think I've really struggled with that whole concept, that I just can't accept it. I can't, and that doesn't mean that I don't like experience failures or don't experience mistakes, because I do. But I think in the bigger picture, I can't. I've got to find a way to crack it. I've got to find a way to get around it and to make it happen. And I think where you get that conviction that you can get it done is with the small things. So I think it builds over time. I think you just develop a confidence in yourself to get it done, and that confidence comes from just saying no and saying yes to the right things, and just developing. Yeah, once you do something small and you do it consistently enough, you have the confidence to do something a little bit bigger, then a little bit bigger, then a little bit bigger. And then once I decide, all right, I want to do that. For me, if it's true to myself and it feels right inside, then it's like this. It's going to happen. Like there's no way it's not going to happen.
And do you find, so that's interesting, because I'd say one of the things that I can anchor to is when I'm in something and I've got the momentum going, I love it. Like to the fact my biggest problem is trying not to do too much that it makes me ill or burnt out. But I definitely, because I don't have that endless energy and drive that you have, the guys running this studio have, that real sort of
I'm
killer instinct.
I actually feel like you've now created a story about this, that you've not got it. I've always thought, I just think you haven't found the thing to apply it to yet.
I hope that's the case, because I feel like it's admirable. I look at you guys' energy and the guys that I work with on the incubators or boards that I sit on, and I think you guys have got this, it's this burning desire, this like life or death. And I think when you have succeeded enough times and it becomes a law of diminishing returns. I remember when I won like my second Entrepreneur of the Year award, and I was like, it became this, and I got this outstanding alumni award in 2019 when I did my cut. And I remember my family coming up and feeling like it was a formality that I was sort of wheeling them out for another award, because you get to a point when that's just your thing. Do you know what I mean?
At the same time, I think we're both similar in that we don't really care about those little milestones, right? I think we just love playing. We just love doing it. Don't we? We love doing business. We love going out and doing things that we didn't think we could do. And I think you're just probably at a point where you just haven't found the thing yet. And I genuinely believe that, because let's face it, you're not 87, right?
Yeah.
And the average age of a founder is what, 42. So I still think you've got your big thing to come. You just haven't found it yet.
Can the thing be like when I suppose one of the reasons I'm asking about motivation and drive and discipline is like when I'm in it, I love it. So it's like now I'm talking about campaign. I'm in campaign season now, and I can already see it. Once I start getting this next week going, I'll just be locked in the work, and I'll love the work. And it can be anything. Send me whatever, social media posts, YouTube interviews, whatever. Send me all this stuff and I'll just do it because I love the work. And I suppose when I'm in it, I love the process. But what it is not, it's just the process that I'm enjoying. Whereas I feel like I'm forcing that. I feel like I have to start it.
Well, I think you have a bigger, when I say the thing, I think you have a bigger thing in terms of like the impact that you can have. Because I think you're one of the smartest people I know, and you're very wise. And I think you've just not applied it in the sense by application. I mean the funnel or the whatever the thing is just hasn't landed for you yet. I think that will arrive when it arrives. Which is why it's cool seeing you do this and you know doing the Blueprint podcast and exploring a different sort of area, because I think it'll help steer you to wherever that ends up becoming, whether it's in education or whether it's in schools or something like that, which I know you've dabbled in. Yeah, and I genuinely appreciate the sentiment. Thank you. And when you think about sort of the discipline, I would say like when I'm on, I'm a notorious pendulum swinger. If I'm in, I'm in. If it's on, hell yes or hell no. Whereas I'd say you're very steady, and I find like one of the reasons my drive might be all in. I'm all in for 12 weeks, and then I'll see you later. I'm out. I'm tapping out. I'm burnt out. I'm done. Come see me again in a month. Yeah. Whereas I feel like you're constantly a lot more steady and a lot more consistent. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's because I just don't do much in life. I don't, and I just don't do many. One thing you've been telling me about is just like this overwhelm you've got, right? And I just don't have that overwhelm in my life where I've got loads of different projects. I think if I had loads of different things, I think I find it very difficult to stay consistently on because I'm just always being pulled in. Do you not struggle to get the hit? You know, like we do in Muay Thai, it's like you signed up straight away for a fight. Yeah. It wasn't like, I'll just do training for a couple of years, do a couple of belts, and I'll go for a fight. It was like 20 weeks to the ring. Do you not find that? Like, I think at the minute I have too many things on, so I definitely need to like rein that in. And I feel like part of that is me chasing enough. It's got to be enough. My tolerance is quite high, so it's got to be enough to give me a hit. Do you find that you need that constant spike, or do you feel like you're quite? I don't feel like I need that. I feel like I get the I feel like I get the joy from just creating my perfect days on a regular basis. Like I've said to you, like my perfect day is just clear calendar, doing some deep work, training hard, spend time with my wife and now my daughter. And as long as it's not too crazy, that feels like a really good day.
Yeah.
Then it's like, all right, how do I stack as many of these as possible? I don't need a hit like to satisfy me and keep me going.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom there. I think that's probably one of the things that I admire, that I like to look to get to, but there's so many reasons I mentally get in my own way with that, I think.
And if I can do that for the next 40, 50 years, I'll be really happy with it. And with my work, I feel the most joy when I'm just creating really good work. And when I feel that less, when I need to motivate myself is when I have to do like all the stuff that neither of us probably enjoy, just anything that's not creative.
Just the chores.
But I think more and more as I've gotten older, I feel more excited about just doing really good work and just putting it out there. And I feel less obsessed with like, I need to build this size business, that size business. It doesn't really, I don't think it'd change my life in any way.
Yeah, that's definitely where I'd like to focus on.
And I think I found more peace at accepting that maybe that's not for me. You know, the idea of, I'm going to build a VC-backed business. I went down that phase. Should I do a VC-backed or should I stay as a small lifestyle business? Or, you know, which one should I pick? And I spent a lot of time over the years driving myself mad over those questions. And then I'd go through a phase, I need to be a VC style business. So let me do the VC things. And then I'll do no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And I think finding peace in like not wanting certain things has helped. And that's a constant refinement. But
just to close the one to finish the round, because that's definitely what I want to achieve. That's definitely where I think I'm sort of direction I'm heading. Other people listening to this are going to be, one of their challenges is going to be feast and famine. Is discipline, whether it's weight loss, diet, consistency of life, just like quick 10 seconds or 20 seconds. What in your mindset, when you think about discipline, like what is it that keeps you on the straight and narrow for so long consistently?
I think it's like, who do I want to be? I don't want to be someone who's out of shape. I don't want to be someone who doesn't care about their health. I don't want to be someone who is known as lazy. I think that's what it is. Like in myself, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to identify as someone who doesn't care about their health or is out of shape.
So it's holding yourself to your own standards, raising your standards and holding yourself there.
Yeah, so I won't let myself get there.
Nice. Interesting. Lots of value there for me on that one. You're up.
Cool. Evolution.
Oh my God. Okay, so where do you want to? So evolution, basically. Like, where are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going?
Where are we going?
Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we've had a lot of quite interesting discussions recently around AI and robots, and we're having some good chats around it over dinner yesterday. I think it'd just be an interesting discussion of like, where have we come from and where are we going, and where are we in this sort of like this space now? What's it going to be known as?
So probably just quick firing off the various topics that we've explored and discussed, because I think they are interesting and they're worth noting. So like, where did we get to? And there's this concept of, so where are we? And we're now creating AI, which is without question has the potential to become the next most advanced, whether you want to call it civilization or not, the most advanced level of intelligence. And it's not a coincidence that simultaneous to developing the technology, the ability to print whatever it is into silicon chips, we've also stored every bit of information over the last, since 1995, we've stored every single piece of information we've ever known about anything ever on a single place, which is the internet. And now all you've got to do is plug ChatGPT into the internet, and all of a sudden you've got the smartest thing in the world. So it's like we've got to that point. So then it's like, right, everyone pretty much knows that. Where does it go? Nobody really knows. Has it been here before is an interesting thing to explore. So it's like, is it possible that we were created by something that was like us creating artificial intelligence? And I said to you yesterday, it would seem, if I said to you the dinosaurs, maybe the dinosaurs created this new species that then became smarter than the dinosaurs, completely wiped the dinosaurs out and took over. And that seems bonkers, but it's like if you compare the human brain, the human dexterity, like our perception of what a human being is against a dinosaur, you think that we're a superior being. Is it possible they created us, we then superseded them, and then that's us?
Yeah. One thing I'm interested about is like when the AI gets really, really good, what is the need for humans?
Well, Elon Musk says, it's that Einstein comparable. There's two. One is the Einstein comparable, which says based on the current ability of artificial intelligence, the processing power of the supercomputers is as advanced as Einstein compared to the bandwidth and data processing ability of an ant. So you put them two on a spectrum, that's where we are already. And Elon Musk says the way that it would become is like AI would become the new superhuman and humans would become the house cat. So it's like how much interest, and you think the AI is going to work 24 hours a day. It's not going to be lazy. It's not going to have hangovers. It's not going to walk around, needing to be fed and watered and soil itself. It's like...
Yeah. I mean, now having a baby myself, I can't believe we've got this far with the way humans are designed. We're talking on the way here about, I think when I was on a safari, zebras can literally come out of the mother's womb and they're running straight away. And a baby it takes a year just to start crawling and then or walking or whatever it is. And they take 18 years just to become a fully fledged adult. And I wonder just how we've got this far with that process.
Yes, that level of slow development. It's like we tried to make horses and carts more efficient, more faster, and then somebody came up with the engine. And it's like we said on this morning, how long does it take the human evolution curve or development curve to become its peak effectiveness? It's got to be decades, maybe 20 years. How long is it then at peak performance? Maybe 10 years, 20 years at best. And then it starts to deteriorate. Whereas a computer, you plug it in, you turn it on, and it's got access to everything. The chips don't need to warm up. They don't need to develop. They need to be built in a factory. But if you've seen Transcendence, it's like, yeah, that sort of stuff gets crazy.
And there's the trial and error element. It's like how much trial and error has gone into evolution? That's very interesting. Like how much trial and error was it to realize that babies need to be fed every 3 hours with this and that, and all the mistakes that went along the way to drive it.
Yeah. And you think, where's it going to go? I mean, we'd like to think it's not going to completely supersede us and it's the new way that the world works. But then it's like you can go down the spirituality side, and it's like when we're talking about not necessarily artificial intelligence, but just life and this whole thing of like regeneration and reincarnation, saying, when you die, that's it. Like that's literally it. You literally die. One day you wake up and then you die.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, well, that's that. And that's the end of that whole human experience. But if you believe in like the soul or reincarnation, stuff like that, you believe that, or human design, you're reborn.
Well, if artificial intelligence takes over and then the humans aren't needed and humans go extinct, what do you think happens to the souls?
Well, I mean, that's just another mind blower, isn't it?
What do they go into? Maybe they go into the robots.
Yeah. I mean, I could literally, I tend not to.
That's crazy, that one.
I tend not to nowadays, but I could. But I mean, then you think, well, maybe we've just got a level of consciousness that we are the old version of AI. If you think, if you were to create AI nowadays with what humans have created, you would use things like alloys, platinum, silicon. You'd use these materials. Whereas back in the day, if you were to use what was best then, and it became, it could then create itself and it could grow and it could repair itself, it would be bones and it would be flesh and it would be a neurological nerve system. It would be a brain that was just a supercomputer that nobody understands how it works. It all looks very version V1 and V2, doesn't it?
Yeah. Bit of a mind blow, that one.
But then if you go to the ultimate, like, blow your head, again, I tend not to go down this hole much anymore because it's like, at the end of the day, you might as well live your life. My year off this year was stop looking, start living. Stop wondering what the meaning of life is, because you get to the end and you've not figured it out and you haven't lived either. So it's like...
Do you think much about death?
I do have periods in my life when I go through it. I've been paranoid about death for various reasons. Most recently, I've had personal and family experiences with death, and it's definitely made it brought it very close to home, but not in like a tragic, traumatizing way, more in like a just factual way. It's like, oh, right, we do all die. Because I've been fortunate. I've never had I've had friends, but I've never had somebody come of age and then as a older parent, someone really close to me die until recently. And then it's like, it's your first experience of like, wow, this death thing does actually happen, and it happens to everyone. And one day that's going to be, we're going to have our last day. And then you think, actually, well, and I think about that on a daily basis at the minute, but that's quite seasonal. But then with the soul side of things, I think about reincarnation. I do believe we live this life. I believe I'm an old soul. I genuinely believe it. I've been here lots of times, and I'll die, and I'll be none the wiser, and I'll be reborn into another body, or a body will be born. I'll go into it, and then I'll wake up the same way I did in this body. I'll have no idea what my previous life was. Yeah. People are like, what's it like when you die? Well, you tell me. You were dead for 42 billion years before you were born as Akash. You were a professional at death. This is a strange thing for you. It's the first time you've been alive, but it really haven't. I mean, or you can believe in evolution and the atheist view of just science, and then it's like, oh, actually, you are dead forever then, and then that can become quite a scary thing.
Do you think time moves quickly?
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, so, for you, do you think time moves quickly?
Well, I woke up last year and realised I was 36, and I was like, where has the last 10 years gone? I actually sat there for about 20 minutes. I was like, I have no idea where the last 10 years has gone. But then also, I've always thought of myself as young. And now I think having lost a parent and become more, I've done 20 years in business this year, get into some sort of position of like financial independence. I feel like I'm starting to grow up. People say you don't feel like an adult until you have a kid or you lose a parent. And I'd say I've not had a kid yet, but I would say I'm starting to experience that. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say I'd agree with that sentiment around having a kid. I do feel that there's an extra sense of responsibility that I didn't have before, but I don't feel like I've suddenly grown up. I think I was already a bit ahead of my time.
Yeah, I feel like I've always been an old soul.
Yeah, like when I was 21 as a personal trainer, we used to have like 40, 45, 50-year-old exec clients, and they'd always say to me, you're 21 going on 40. And I never really understood it, but I kind of get it now. I think I was just always... I wasn't into what a normal 21-year-old should be into.
And I think that's the old soul. We've been here so many times. We don't need any more jet skis and paragliding. Yeah. We were here to get stuff done.
What's interesting is you said you're 37 and you feel like, where's the 20
years?
I think
I'm 36. Am I 37? I might be 36.
Where's the 20 years gone? But the idea is like, if you think, you might go to 80, 85, 90, you've still got another lifetime of what you've already experienced to go.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting.
And I think that is probably where I do want to start a family. That's part of it. It's part of the next chapter. I do sometimes sit there and think, I've done this for 20 years. I can't do this for another 20 years. Because it's a lot of the same, but doing new stuff, isn't it? Which is fun and exciting, but it's like there is a degree of...
Your calendar will look very different then.
Yeah, exactly. And just experience a new part of life. We go through these chapters in our lives. So yeah, that's a very good topic. Nice round. Round 4. What do we disagree on? So you're one of my closest friends. We've worked together for a long time. We've been through a lot of stuff personally and professionally, and we're very aligned. Like, it's very rare we have a conversation. We love to debate, but what do we actually fundamentally disagree on?
I think the one that sticks to mind is you were very against Channy coming into the business. That was one thing we actually disagreed on. And you're one of the few people, like whenever I ask for advice, you're usually like bang on the money. And there's very few things I'll disagree with and think, I'm just going to do something different. And that was one of the only ones which you kept saying, don't do it. And I was like, I don't think I agree with him. But then when I decided, I found it really hard to tell you because I was like, he's going to be like, oh, that was a bad decision. And luckily it worked out well. But that's one thing I can think of that I disagreed with you on. And it worked out okay. And
just for context, I sent you a voice note for 6th birthday the other day.
That's probably why it's top of mind.
And what, and on reflection, my sentiment was, when we first started working together, I said to you, there's no silver bullet, there's no white knight. It's like, I will always offer you my opinion, which is my responsibility, but yours is to challenge me when you think I'm wrong. And then you have to make the best decision. And I said, and again, coming back on it, I said, hats off, without a doubt, that was one of the best decisions you made in the business. And it was completely different to what I thought. And I think for those listening who are considering it, it probably is an illustration of my wisdom, which sort of suggests that the odds are against you, but you have a very unique and impressive relationship with your partner, your wife, the mother of your daughter, and now I don't know whether you'd say business partners, but like
That's what we call each other.
you do call each other business
Yeah.
partners. Yeah, you have a very unique experience where you're able to balance all of those. And hats off to you. It was absolutely the right decision. And the business wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for you making that decision.
Yeah, and I think for those who are wondering, like, how should you ever go in business with your partner? I think it's the same as like going into a business with another normal business partner, but 10 times as harder, because in terms of like the qualification necessary, you know, your values got to be aligned, your mission's got to be aligned, you got to be able to speak about the hard things, and you got to be able to also play different hats. So husband, wife, father, mother, business partners, and juggling all that in one.
And it's very, again, yeah, it's like the odds were stacked against you. But I would say absolutely. If we had our time again, I would say you made absolutely the right decision.
So that's the only one I can think of top of mind. The other one is probably what we spoke about earlier, where, you know, you tell me you've lost that edge and energy. I still feel like you've got it. Maybe you're showing scars. Maybe you've got scars I've not seen, but I personally think you've still. I still think you're young. I'm like, you've got another 30 years, 60 years. 60.
I wouldn't say it's. Yeah, I would say it's. So yeah, I think we do disagree on it, and I think it's worth.
We talk about it often, don't we?
The value here is exploring it, because you know, either we're both right, we're both wrong, or you know, the answer's somewhere in the middle. And I think it's maybe the from my side, it's the fact that I used to have this killer instinct that nothing else mattered, and I needed to get to the top of the mountain. And that was my drive. And then having done that, I now no longer have that drive. But agreed, I should.
So I'm going to challenge you, because you say you haven't got that killer instinct and you don't have that burning desire. But what do you spend most of your days doing?
I wouldn't say it was pleasant. I wouldn't say my killer instinct. I would say it was an obligation. There was no way I couldn't do it. And it was all driven by parents' expectations, fear of failure. Like, I wanted to do all that stuff, but now I've achieved it.
So I think what this is actually is a shift from operating from scarcity, where it's like there's like
Pain.
Yeah, it's just like pain, anger, fear, all these things, and then operating from like abundance. And you know, it's like push and pull theory. You know, push theory is you're running away from the tiger. Pull theory is you're pulling yourself to a new reality. And I think maybe you're just not used to now being away from the push and now into the pull, and you just haven't explored what business life looks like when you don't have to run away from things just to feel like you've got that killer instinct, because that's not sustainable. That's like to get you out of the mess or whatever you think is the mess. The next layer is probably the next layer which you haven't embraced yet, or accepted. I don't know if that's one.
I think you're right. I do think you're right. I think, yeah, I do genuinely think you're right. And I think as I'm progressing through it, there's certain things that I'm learning. Like in the last month, it's finally become apparent to me I'm doing too much stuff. I'm involved in too many businesses, too many investments, too many deals. And then I was speaking to somebody on Friday, and I said, I feel like I don't have time to do a good job. You know, you were saying earlier, you just want to do a good job. When I've sat down recently and done some really good work, I'm so proud of it. I'm really happy. One of my life coaches says, you know, you feel that sense of sensation it's going to be when it's done. But when you don't have enough time in the day, chasing deals and activity and opportunity replaces that satisfaction. It's that probably like lack of urge control.
I think it might be. I think the acceptance things, by the way, is really interesting to explore, because maybe you're in that state now where you don't have these expectations or these fears that you were once operating from, and you thought that was your killer instinct. And it probably was to an element to like get you where you were. But now it's like you don't have that fueling you, and you got another fuel, but you're just not tapping into it. You're not accepting that I can do it without these negative emotions, that you think it has to be stars on your eyes, your hair falling out, hallucinations. You think it has to be that to do it. Like I've not had a blackout experience, or the scalp, my when my scalp used to peel off. I haven't had any of that, or crusty ears, or whatever the things that my skin used to do when I was burnt out. I haven't had that for ages now, and I wonder why that's been a big shift. Because for the first few years in business, that's all I was getting. Like every few months I get that, and I was wearing it as a badge of honor. I was loving it. The more it happened, the more I'd lean into it and think this is what it's all about. This is the pain. But then I've kind of moved away from that. And now I'm like, if I get that, I'm like, something's really wrong if that's happening.
You know, when we put it back to, so a lot of this connects to the drive question and drive topic earlier. We were talking about the Muay Thai fight, and you were saying, you know, you were driven by, you didn't want to be a failure. You know, failure is not an option. Is that being driven by a place of pain, or is that a pull of you want to have the satisfaction of having done a fight?
Yeah. So the fight, for example, there was two reasons for it. One was like, I want to, you know, when I was a teenager, I did boxing for a bit. So I got mugged as a teenager. I did some boxing, thinking that would help me build my confidence up. And then I did sparring. I did my first sparring session when I was like 16, and I got like quite badly hit quite often. And I never went back in the gym. And I completely forgot about that whole thing until I started Muay Thai. And I was like, I need to prove to myself that I can step in the ring, hold my own, and not like sort of back away. So that was one fuel that only really came to me right at the end. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that happened. But most of it was just more like, can I actually do this? It was more from a state of, yeah, can I actually be a fighter? Can I move my body in a way that is, you know, can withstand the rigors of a fight camp?
And when we pull that into, it's basically the superior man, right? It's being a superior man. And when I'm locked into that superior man, I'm like, I know that I'm in my element. I can like take myself to levels that nobody else will.
Yeah.
But that is also the scary part, because it's like when you become so obsessed in that space, it's like I watch other people who are doing stuff and you just think, you know, David Goggins is a good example. You know, he's going out and doing 3 ultra marathons in a week, and you're like, does it get to a point where you actually, it's not self-fulfilling, it's actually self-sabotage?
Well, he talks about it as he uses this, he says like performance without purpose. I think it's really interesting. And he says he's working on himself in that, he says he's just working on the project of himself and trying to peel the onion and find out more and more about who he is. And he thinks his whole purpose is just to figure that shit out. I think that's really interesting, because I think when you exhaust the body, you can really tap into the mind. You can really tap into like what you're capable of and what you've like actualized or realized in your life. I think it's very, for me personally, that's my way of like finding that peace.
It does get, do you not find it does get to a place of like self-harm though, where you do get to a point of like,
if you're doing it in a negative way, where you're doing it because you want to burn calories, you're doing it because you want
even
to
just like cutting
shredded,
weight. You know, if you and I do a weight cut, like I'm saying I'll go down to 63.
Yeah.
I shot at 58 last time. It's like when I get to 63 and I'm like beach lean, am I going to stop at 63? Or am I then going to be like, okay, let's just take another couple of kilos off? Well, we're down here anyway. Let's go bone dry.
I think it's self-harm if you try and stay there. It's self-harm if you try and do things that's not healthy to your body. There's no harm in doing.
Well, even when you're in the hole.
Climbing that mountain. Well, you're seeing what you're capable of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean,
that's where all the growth is. There's no growth in getting down to 63. Anyone can do that.
yeah. Well, exactly.
Right? Anyone can do that. You're not going to, where you found all your growth was 63 to 58.
Yeah, it was like doing the 3 Peaks challenge last week. The target is, can you do it in 24 hours? And that's the challenge. We all of a sudden, like before we even started, we were like, we should probably be able to nail this in 22. And we did it in 21:57. Yeah. And you're like, why does it actually matter? It doesn't matter. In a world where nothing matters, like nothing does matter. We're all going to be dead. In a blink of an eye, we're going to be dead. And nothing matters. But in a world where nothing matters, you choose what matters. And in that scenario, that matters.
It's also a confidence thing. Knowing you can go from 63 to 58, you can then transfer that into anything.
100%.
I think that's where the biggest growth is.
Yeah, it's the trust piece. Like if you, confidence is like a French word for like trust. I think it's like confidant, which means trust. It's like you've trusted yourself enough times to do something and delivered. It just builds your confidence and takes you where you need to be. Good one. So actually, we don't really disagree on much. Is that the conclusion?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm happy with that. Sign. I went into that round with I had no answers. Like, what do we disagree on? I was like, I don't know.
Here's a bit of a right wing one or left wing. I don't know what the direction is, but sex.
Interesting. When you said like, what's an example of topics? I nearly said sex earlier.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Right, sex. So obviously, very broad topic. I would say place to start it off is like most recently from a personal experience is like having looked at my relationship, other people around me's relationship, especially people who've had kids and started young families, and watched how, obviously when you start going down the rabbit hole, you look at stuff, but it's like how significant sex is, active sex is within a relationship.
What do you think about it?
I think it's like a biological thing. And I was chatting to someone at the gym about it, and there's a Instagram reel or whatever. I've not seen it, but he says about like he comes home and his missus is like banging the pans around. She's in a mood. She's like, "Oh, move your stuff," blah blah blah, and he's like, "Not having this." Picks her up, chucks her over the shoulder, takes her upstairs. They have sex, and they come downstairs. She's like, "Oh, darling, I'm gonna, what do you want for your dinner? I'm gonna make your favourite tea." And it's like, as a man and a woman, I think you have to have this biological connection, physical connection. And I've had it in my relationship in the past where this stress and energy seems to come out of nowhere and it's building up and building up. And then you might get a week in and then you have sex and both of you are like, oh my God, that's what the problem was. We hadn't had sex for a week, and it just sort of like releases the stress. And I think and looking at people who've had kids, I think one of the challenges, and maybe you've tuned into this or you haven't with like people but it becomes consistent sex through a relationship, obviously with the same person. Consistent sex for a relationship can become a challenge. Throw in there a 40-hour working week and then a kid, and it's like all of a sudden it becomes it can easily get shelved, and the longer you leave it, the worse it gets, I find.
Yeah, I think polarization in a relationship is really important. Otherwise,
masculine and feminine, or
and just having those polar opposites, because otherwise you lose that energy and that edge that you have. Again, it's another thing from David Dida. He talks about it. If it's blunt, like if you're both in the middle, you're both neutral, you're basically just friends.
Yeah, like housemates.
And you need to have that masculine and feminine pull. And it doesn't matter. Obviously, it doesn't matter. Feminine could be in a man, masculine body in a man, etc. But you need to have that polarization in order to drive the energy that a relationship can create.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Do you think you're quite? Do you think a lot about sex?
Less so. When I was younger, I would say I was your traditional hormonal male, and it was the top of the agenda forever. Someone said to me once, "Why did you want to be successful?" And I actually said as half a joke, because I wanted to get laid. And I actually was walking through the supermarket the other day, and I was thinking, do you know what? Like, I think that might have actually been a real key contributor, because like I'm not your traditional good-looking guy. I was like, what gets you to the top of the pile? Being publicly successful. And I remember, I just, even from like 12, 13, whatever was cool or whatever, I did it. And it was effective. Like, it was never something, having being able to attract women was not something, a challenge that I had. But then also, as soon as you can get it, it wasn't a focus either. I've had limited partners. I normally stay with people for years rather than months. I'm not interested in the like one night stand, all that sort of game. But I do think about it. I think about it more practically, which might not be the right thing to do.
What do you mean?
So, for example, dopamine levels. So, like, I'm constantly if we're going into the period like now, I'll be really focused on dopamine. So, fasting in the morning, not having anything to doing anything to spike my dopamine levels. And I find like sex or masturbation is like something that can just deplete your dopamine straight away. So, if I'm not actively having sex, I can feel it physically build up this, like, not necessarily stress, but drive, like hunter mentality. And I feel like practically I sort of tune into that. So I'd be a bit strategic about when I would choose to have sex and when I wouldn't. It definitely wouldn't be at 5 o'clock in the morning on a work day.
So you basically got an army timetable out of when I'm going to have sex.
Well, yeah, it's like, no, not so much. But so there's that. And then also keeping the relationship, a balance of keeping the relationship fresh and exciting and intimate, and also not neglecting it, like not having, like I said at the beginning, I think not having active sex in your relationship. And there is a whole new wave of content coming out now. I think Jay Shetty's talking about it. There's loads of people talking about how, most people are not having sex. Like, most people are not having an active sex life with their partner. And I think it's more than I think it's a lot more than just satisfaction. I think there's a connection piece, an intimacy piece for a man and a woman, the masculine and feminine sort of ownership and, that sort of piece. I think there's a biological piece for men and women, probably in my experience, more so women, where they need to feel that either the connection or even biologically it releases some sort of chemical where they just feel safe, loved, satisfied, loved, connected. And if they don't have it, it has the adverse effect. What about you? What springs to mind when you think about sex?
So I think it's interesting you said, right, when the work week's involved and life is involved, you think less. I think less about sex, and I'm probably the same. Like, as soon as I go on holiday, my sex drive goes through the roof, and I often wonder when that happens, I'm like, what's been going on? Because this is new, and it's just I think work and just working and doing things can blunt your sex drive if you're not careful, and when you are like hell bent on one thing, you can easily just forget about sex. I think I have to sometimes, if I'm like pushing hard with work and pushing hard with training, your sex drive can actually just take a massive hit. So you have to be careful about that. And I think if that does happen for me, I usually use that as a sign of I'm probably overdoing it, because hormones probably aren't in the right place. So, but at the same time, if I don't have sex for a period, then I do feel that build up, and then there's that urge to like.
I mean, sometimes
release.
you've got to do it. Like sometimes it's like this is like Joe Rogan talks about it like comically, and it's like you don't have a choice. It is the top of your physical, mental.
Yeah, it's just in your head all the time, right?
It's just and it needs to be done. It's like it's a stress. It's like, yeah, and I mean stress as so it's a positive stress. That in that case, you've literally got your body either physically or mentally or whatever's got to release, but also stress on your libido. Like you say, you go on holiday. You're on holiday for it could be 3 hours. You get down, touch down on the beach. You're in your swim shorts. You're like, wow. You're like, hello, what's going on here? And you're like running back to the hotel room, and you're doing it 3 times in a day. And you're like, we haven't done that for a long time. Yeah. It's very real thing.
Yeah. Do you think people are? Do you think relationship? Do you talk about it a lot in your relationship, or do you sort of? Is it something you have conversation in your own head
about frequency of sex?
Yeah, just sex overall.
So, I would say Sav is like when we talk about masculine and feminine. Sav and I are both quite balanced. So, like, she's got very masculine traits, but also very feminine traits. And I would say I'm not like your traditional alpha male. I can be quite masculine and quite feminine, and that can also balance in the bedroom. Like sometimes she could want to be the more not masculine, but I mean like she would be the one that brings it up in conversation or wants to talk about it. Where previously, early on in our relationship, I might be quite shy about it, quite not prude about it, but it was like something that happens in the bedroom, in that enclosure, and the things that go on in there perhaps don't then get talked around the dinner table. Like that was quite for me, maybe in my upbringing or whatever, it was just the way that I sort of split it. But over recent couple of years, it's definitely become more, we can talk about it during the day, we might have a little bit of a flirt, it's like, it's...
What do you say? You say your masculine and feminine balance. What do you say your feminine traits are?
Probably like, I'm not like an alpha male who's like completely dominate a woman, be completely like ravish. It's not always a complete ravishing. Yeah. And also, I've studied like.
Do you think that is like an alpha? Because when I think of an alpha male in the way you talk about it, I think you're going to bring up Sigma, right? I think it'd be a bit more like that.
Yeah, I'm probably more like Sigma. I suppose in the bedroom, it's like when you read books like What Women Want Men to Know and all these stuff about what everyone thinks sex is, which is basically what you see on porn. How hard can you do it? How rough can it be? How much level of degradation can there be? All these extremes now that exist. And it's like, I would say it's unhealthy in the main. Like my general attitude towards that stuff is I don't want that in my life. I don't find it has a positive benefit on my life, my mental health, my relationship. Whereas in a relationship, sometimes there's a time to throw them over your shoulder and absolutely go for it. Equally, sometimes they want to fill their boots, and it's like I'm quite happy to let the balance play. I would say as well, the good thing is I've never really had to actively invest, apart from the conscious effort of doing it, never had to invest in the sex life of like, how do we keep it fresh? How do we keep it new? How do we stop our eyes from wandering? And I feel that's down to like the relationship as well as the sex.
Yeah, agreed.
Boom, good one. Right, last but not least, this round 6.
Yep.
So round 6, fatherhood. So this has been tabled lots of times, and I would say we've covered most of the top. Like you and I spoke about it previously, but there'll be lots of people in my shoes listening to this who have not got a friend, a confidant, a family member who's so close to the line of living the fast-paced entrepreneur lifestyle. I'm never going to have time to have a family. Do I want to have kids? I'm too busy. I've got my own agenda. To then pretty much out of nowhere, not out of nowhere, but pretty immediately falling pregnant, having a child, and you're in a very unique space where it's fresh enough for you to reflect on the first few months of being a father and having a baby, or first year of having a baby on the way and being a father to a newborn, and rapidly scaling a 6-year scale-up company. And I just wanted to get some insight from you on the mindset, the journey, the pros and cons.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I've always wanted to be an active father. The reason why I stopped being a personal trainer on the gym floor was because I started seeing my colleagues around me having children. And as a personal trainer, it's very unsociable hours. It's Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m., 5 a.m. you leave the house, you're back home at 10. And I started seeing my colleagues having children, and they always turn up on Monday bleary-eyed. And I said, how's the weekend? He's like, yeah, it's good, but I was just sleeping most of it, so I don't really get a chance to see my kids. I don't really get a chance to see them in the week. And I remember thinking to myself, that's going to be my reality at some point in the future if I don't make a change. So one of the reasons why I was always conscious about the way I set up my business and life was to at some point be an active dad. Somewhere along the lines, that kind of got forgotten. And then it became the natural, well, I don't have time for this, or I'm going to lose my flexibility. All this flexibility I've created for myself to have kids, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose the ability to do whatever I want, whenever I want, have a slow morning, just chill and have a coffee with my wife on the armchair, or whatever it is. So then I got stuck in this cycle for about a year of, I don't think this is a thing for me. And then I was doing my photo shoot prep last year. And as always, in the last few weeks, when you're in that space that we discussed earlier, like the extreme bit, that's when I was like, I think we should have kids. Like, I think, and Chani was saying, you sure? Where did that come from? I thought a couple months ago you were saying this isn't for you anymore. I said, no, I think I think now's the time. Like, I feel ready. She's like, how are you going to make it work? I was like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. And I don't think I think the idea sounded great, but I don't think it really settled. Anyway, then we decided to come off the pill, got pregnant pretty much straight away. And then the reality sunk in of like, shit, we've got 7 months to go, once we found out. And then it was...
And just to sort of, because I was fortunate enough to be there in that moment.
Yeah, the first person I told.
Indirectly when you found out, and people are sitting there thinking they're still on the fence. What's it going to be like when it actually happens? How did you feel in that isolated 2 hours when you found out? How did you feel?
Yeah, it's great because you think of when you find out about pregnancy, you're jumping up and down, you're opening balloons and all these things. My first reaction when Chani, like, for a week, she'd been saying to me, like, I think I'm late on my period. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, what do you want
for dinner?
Yeah. I'll just move the conversation on. Honestly, I wasn't sinking in at all. Then she sat me down and she's like, look, I think we need to take a pregnancy test. I was like, okay, fine. And she took it. My first reaction was, fuck. And I didn't know what to do. I was almost like speechless. But not in like this is amazing news. It was almost like, shit, what are we going to do? And then I was like, I need to speak to someone. So I text you. I was like, and you were like, well, first off, congratulations. And then I think you kind of leveled me out with it. I can't remember the exact words, but I think you said, I think this is a blessing in disguise. Like, this is obviously amazing news. And then once it settled in, then I kind of felt the emotions that you feel and the excitement. But that took me about a month. The first month, I was just like almost not in denial, but I was scared. And I was worried about this loss of freedom, worried about how I'm going to live my life of training and working. And then as we got closer to the deadline, it really forced me to think differently about how I'm working. And I was like, there's certain things now I just need to delegate or I need to restructure. But again, it only kicked in the last 6 weeks. And that's when I was like, shit, I've got 6 weeks to go. I've got to change these things. And then I think it only settled in about having a daughter when it actually happened. And when she actually came in, then I was like, oh, wow, this is the feeling. Because my biggest fear before Sia arrived was, would I be able to connect with her? Would I feel the emotions toward her? would I feel any love towards her, or would it be a very robotic black and white relationship that I have with my daughter?
And the reason for that, for those who are listening and wondering why you'd say that, is you and I are quite stoic and quite black and white, quite old soul. We're not hugely emotional people.
Yeah, not emotional, very level-headed. I don't really say I love you. Chinese
told me twice now, so I'm holding both of them. I've gone and saved as my wallpaper.
and Chinese said to me, he's like, I hope you say I love you to your daughter one day. And I was like, I hope so too, but I hope I don't just say it because I'm just saying it rather than actually feeling it. But when she arrived, there was like this sense of like, oh wow, there is a feeling of love that you can't describe. Like I used to always feel, I wonder what that feels like. I wonder like if there's an actual thing. And my dad would say to me, oh, when she arrives, you'll know. And when she did arrive, I was like, oh, like there is that feeling, and there is an emotion there that I feel towards her. And then when it came to like bringing it into reality of working and business, somehow it's just sort of fallen into peace. And now I've just got this like blend of work and life. I thought I was going to take a 2-week paternity leave. I didn't really take it. I just sort of did a bit of work, did a bit of parenting, did a bit of work, did a bit of training, like did a bit of parenting. And it's just like I've sort of found a blend, and I'm obviously still finding a routine. Like it's always evolving. Every few weeks it evolves, but I've never had the like stress of I've got a young kid. Or I don't feel stressed I've got a young kid. I don't feel that it's a burden. I feel like it's a chapter in my life that I'm really happy to experience.
And having gone from that initial space where you weren't sure, then you found out you were pregnant, and it was like, oh shit.
Now I feel like I think I was saying to you yesterday night, I was like, this is something you've definitely got to experience. Like I don't think it impacts you as an entrepreneur in any way. So far anyway, I've like my work in the last 6 weeks, I'm really fresh, like I'm 6 weeks in. But I think whilst I may not be able to do as much work as I'd have liked, the quality of my work has gone through the roof, because the time I'm working, I've got no time to mess around. And I don't want to mess around, mainly because you're sleep deprived and you've got less energy. So because you've got less energy, there's only so much good output you can do before you're just running on fumes. So for me, I've realized I've got like 4 or 5 hours of good quality work. And then after that, nothing's possible. So I've got to be really careful with what I prioritize and careful with what I do. But the experience of like having a daughter is amazing. And I have to pinch myself that she's here. Like I honestly, sometimes I'm like, how has this come from me?
And do you feel like it, with regards to for those people who are in my sort of shoes, who are debating whether or not it's a step they want to take, would you say it's made you a better entrepreneur, a worse entrepreneur? This sacrifice.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, so I can't say is it going to make me a better entrepreneur, because you need a longer time frame for that. But in terms of sacrifice, I don't feel that sense of I need to sacrifice my work. I need to sacrifice.
I need to take Sia out for a walk.
One thing I am doing is I'm trying to be careful of ever feeling resentment for that exact reason, because I feel like my work is still my number one priority, and that might sound a bit controversial. I think that is my number one priority in my life, and then I put Sia and my family as number 2 at the moment, and then probably my training. And those 3 always rotate whatever's going on in life. But I think that's the order I see it. But I never want to feel resentment when I'm working that I could be spending time with Sia. And I never want to be with Sia and think, I should be working. And I've had a few moments where I've been with Sia and I'm like, I should really be working right now. And I'm trying to tune into when that happens so then I can avoid it the next time. So then when I'm with her, I'm just with her. And that's a skill I think I need to work on. But I think that's where entrepreneurs may feel like they don't want to go through it, because they feel like it's going to take away from what they want to go for. Because that drive or drive an entrepreneur is never going to go, right? You can't just suddenly let go of that. And I think if you do let go of that, you'll actually create more resentment, and you'll feel more like, I'm not really being able to live my life because I have to look after my daughter. I don't think it should work like that. I think it should become like a blend. And that's what I'm trying to build anyway. I'm trying to build a blend here where all of it, I get the best of both worlds. And I'm lucky enough to have a wife who's dedicating herself to being the main carer. And I think probably as an entrepreneur, that if you don't have that, I think that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I get that. And timing wise, just to roll up, you said, so when we were saying at the beginning about people who are sitting where I am thinking, I feel like having kids is part of the human experience. It's something I want to do. but then there's always timing. I would say timing wise, it has been quite a good timing for you. You've been enough years in to have the business established, have a team. Equally, you could have gone on for another 5 years without doing it. One of the questions I asked you, you asked me, or I asked you last night, we were talking about timing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember what you said to me as a closing sentiment, but I said, now would be quite a good time for me to have kids because of it, justifying why there's a nice little window of opportunity in this 9 months or this year. And do you remember what you said to me?
It's like all the best entrepreneurs in the world have children.
Oh yeah, you said all the best entrepreneurs in the world have children. You said, tell me now what you can't do when you have a kid. Because obviously to me it was like life stops when you have a kid. Yeah. You said, tell me what you can't do if you had a kid.
Yeah, there's nothing I can't do now that I've got a kid. I'm still doing the same things. I'm still training. I'm still working. I'm still coming out, still spending time with you. There's literally nothing that I'm doing in my life. I'm still traveling. We've got Mexico for a month booked this year. We've got other multiple trips. We're doing the same amount of traveling this year as we did last year.
Which while Channy was pregnant as well. You've probably done more traveling the last 2 years. She had a kid than the year before.
Exactly. So there's literally nothing in my life I'm not doing, and I'm not planning to stop because I think that's the experience of life. You just got to bring it. You got to find your life by design, then just push it forward.
On that note, we'll call it 6 rounds. Nicely done. Well done, brother.